grab your popcorn, kick back and relax, because it's time for some more Karnage. In today's video, we're going to be discussing something I think you guys will be pretty excited about. That is, warrior pathfinding. So, how to predict the path of every warrior, like, regardless of where those warriors are, whether you're flaring the core, a building, doesn't matter, how to predict that path and where they're going to go. So, I think you guys will be pretty excited for that. Like my last video, that was on Zuka pathfinding in particular. If you guys haven't checked that out, I really suggest you do. It covers some basic stuff with pathfinding you guys might find interesting. In particular, the part where pathfinding tends to differ is when if you place like a flare on in the open without it touching any buildings, all troops pretty much respond the same way to that. It's when, like, say, if I drop a flare on this residence, for example, every troop is going to respond differently to that. And in Warriors in particular, you're dropping flares on buildings pretty much all the time. That's how you use them. So, that's how this guide is going to differ from the last. Of course, this is all subject to change because, for those who don't know, Supercell is infamous for changing things in the background without telling anyone when they do updates. In particular, with pathfinding, they only change it when they plan to release a new troop or they think something's too overpowered. So they will make slight little changes to things, and normally that's basically the only thing that'll change is where the troop finishes up at. So that's something to note. Of course, before we start the video, I just want to mention that this is just a theory. This is my theory. It's how I predict the troops, and it's what I find to be the most accurate. I've never had a problem with it, and I always manage to predict the path of my warriors like exactly every time. So hopefully you guys find it helpful too, and let's jump into this. Okay, so now we're going to look at warriors when they're out in the open on the battlefield and they haven't got to a building yet. What we want to know is, when it comes to pathfinding, whereabouts on that building are they going to pick to go to? That's the information we need to know, and that's what we're going to find out at the moment. So, you guys can see I've got a bunch of warriors deployed on my map, and I've flared this machine gun. So, before I explain to you the logic here, I want to point one thing out. This theory is subject to change, in particular this part of it, because how this works is it takes into account how they're going to spread around the building, and their position is determined by a lot of little things in their code. So pretty much, if Supercell change even the tiniest little thing with pathfinding, this is going to greatly alter where they finish up at. So, to make this simple, we're going to just assume they're going to pick the worst possible path every time. That's the easiest way to do it. At the time I started filming this, the warriors in the landing craft on each end, so the one on the furthest to the left and furthest to the right, they were picking a position in the very back of the machine gun, right at the top corner. They were picking the side of the building, but right at the top end. At the time I'm filming this, they're actually picking, really, those two landing crafts on each side at the moment. They are still picking the side, but it's more towards like the front end, which is sort of a bit weird. So the positions have altered a little bit, but let's just watch this attack in slow motion, see where they're going to go. Let's pay very close attention to the ones on the left at the very end here. So we can see that they actually formed right around that side bit, in particular, like right at the front. So at the moment, the landing crafts are a little bit back to front in how they pick their positions. So what does that mean for us when we're doing pathfinding? Well, I'm going to show some pathing on screen right now from where they were to where they are now, and you'll see that the line isn't 100% accurate if you rewatch the attack. The reason why I've put the lines where they just were is pretty simple, because that's, as I explained before, that line would be worst case scenario. So if Supercell changed their code to how it was, or to how it normally is, where those warriors will go to the side but towards the top end of the building, that's going to muck your pathfinding up pretty bad, and that's what's going to give you grief, that's what's going to cause you problems, that's what's going to make you lose troops. So that's how we're going to predict the pathing, just because it's the safest possible option. And I have explained the logic, so if you don't want to predict it to that corner, you want to keep paying attention to all the changes all the time, you can definitely feel free to do that. But I think this will help the most people. Okay, so now it's time to look at something a little more interesting, and that's how a warrior reacts when you drop a flare on a building when they're already surrounding one. See, this is where the behavior of troops really starts to change when you drop the flare on that building. And with warriors, when they're already surrounding a building and you can see that there's no other warriors that still have to get there, and there is a reason why I'm pointing that all of them are there, but we will get to that in a moment. Because all of the warriors are there, when I place the flare on, say, this rocket, what actually winds up happening is something pretty interesting. All the warriors are going to walk to the exact position on that rocket where they are relative to where they are now. So you can see that there's one warrior in this bunch that's really badly hurt. His health is red. When he walks to this rocket, if providing of course that that's the building I was trying to walk to, he will walk to the same position on that rocket. So he will walk to a spot that's close to the bottom left corner, because that's where he is on the sniper, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to show on screen right now, I'm not going to take into account what side of buildings they're going to walk around and stuff like that, but what I am going to do is I'm going to show you whereabouts on this rocket certain warriors would walk. We're going to look at the ones on each corner. We're also going to look at maybe one in the middle or something like that, just as an example to throw it out there, you know, mix it up a little bit. So I'm showing all those walking lines on screen, as you can see right now. And yeah, I thought you guys would find this interesting, so let's watch this in slow motion, and I want you to pay close attention to that warrior that's badly hurt, where he is now, and where he is when he finishes up at that rocket. So dropping a heap of smokes right now, just to make 100% certain that everything stays safe. So the warriors are making their way up there right now, and it is a little hard to tell sometimes which warrior is going to take the side of a certain building, but as long as you're protecting the ones that are going to be on the outside or the furthest away, or you predict and that path, and the ones that are going to be potentially the most troublesome and may escape your smoke are the ones you want to make sure you're protecting. If you can protect those, essentially you're going to protect everything else at the same time. So that's the logic there. Anyway, they have made their way to the destination, and as visual proof you can see that that warrior in the red is pretty much in exactly the same location. So that's proof of the fact of what I was saying, and let's jump into the next segment. Okay, so now we're going to briefly touch on something I mentioned in the last segment, and that is the spreading of warriors. So when you So if you have your warriors like placed around a building, and there's some lagging behind, maybe they've been hit by a shock mine, or they've been hit by a shock launcher, or whatever it is, you've got all your warriors around one building, and there's some that just haven't got there yet, and you have to flare up to wherever it is you're going. If you pay close enough attention, and this is something that you don't have to worry about, I'm really just mentioning it because it's good to have that information anyway. Pretty much what you're going to notice is when they get to their target, some of them have changed their position. They're not where they would have been at the last building you were at. So the reason for that is spreading. The warriors that haven't got there yet, they're going to walk to wherever it is they would have been at their target. So say the sniper is where all the warriors were. If they were going to be like at the bottom right hand corner, if you were flaring to here, those warriors are still going to walk to that spot, but everything else is going to change its position a little bit just to account for those ones that haven't got there yet. As I said, it's not something you guys really have to care about or have to account for or do anything with. I'm really just mentioning this just so you guys have all the facts. So now we're going to be discussing a heap of stuff in regards to mines. So there's some various ways you guys can deal with them using pathfinding. So you guys don't necessarily have to use critters or barrage or artillery to take them out. So that'll be interesting. Keep in mind though that there's no right or wrong way to deal with mines. Everyone has their own approach. I'm just showing them just so you guys have can see a bunch of different ways. It's really just finding the cheapest possible alternative to get there. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at a really sick method you guys can use to avoid mines on corner bases, and this is purely a pathfinding just a little trick a lot of high level players use. You can see that this base has a lot of mines. There's a shock mine you can't see hidden behind this armory. There's a couple of mines on the way up here. There's a boom mine next to this stone storage. There's actually 3 mines behind this cannon here. And basically when you sum this whole thing up and you look at it and you think about it, you say, wow, this is a lot of mines. If I was to barrage out this shield generator, which is a strategy that some people use to take that out, you no longer have the GBE to be barraging or dealing with the mines really. So one way, there is many other ways, but one little cool trick you guys can use to help avoid these mines is by grouping up your warriors and hugging only the right side of the buildings all the way up. Now you might be asking yourself, how do you do this? Well, this trick, I don't know for how long this is going to be possible, for the simple reason that this only just came into being because of this Cryoneer update. In this update, they made it a thing where all the troops group up super tight. You guys can see an example of this in a previous video I did called Understanding Pathfinding Changes. You can find that in the playlist called Guides. So basically how they work is when any troop groups up, if you flare directly against the wall, like this one on the right here, they're going to form a line along that wall. So as a result, if we group up our troops tight enough, we can actually make them only walk along the right side of the buildings. So let's look at how I'm doing this. Whoa. Okay. So I basically did a Zuka style landing. You guys can see that I've placed a flare just here. That's because if we flare straight up, if you guys draw walking lines right now with something straight, you guys can sort of see that they're going to walk along the left side of not all of the buildings, but the first few, and we don't want them to do that. So there's 2 ways to avoid this. The first one is to either flare in front of the first building. In this case, that's not possible because it's actually touching all the available pixels along that wall. except the curvy bit, but that's going to cause some issues where they're going to walk around the left side of the first building, so we don't want them to do that. So we're going to flare in between the very first buildings we come across. This will help avoid any issues they're going to have. So I'm aware that I'm not smoking as effectively as I could be. So you guys can see just how many mines I'm avoiding right now. And you can see that I'm going to place a smoke here that wasn't needed. I'm going to place a smoke where the flare is, and then the HQ, and then I'm going to flare the HQ. I could have let them sit where the flare actually was and then go there, but they would have hit the same amount of mines anyway. It's just the damage would have been spread out a little better. That said though, if I had a time to flare better, I could have saved more smokes. I could have spaced them out, my smokes out more, and definitely reduced my smokes by at least 2 smokes. At least. I think I could have saved 3 if I was really trying, but the point is still illustrated. This is a cool little way and technique that you guys can use to help avoid a lot of mines without much expense. Okay, so a question that some people start pondering when they start talking about pathfinding is, what happens when the line goes perfectly down through the middle of a building? What side do they choose? What side of that building do they choose to walk around? Do they go to the left side, the right side? What side do they go around? So that's what we're going to be discussing now. Normally, when you think it's through the middle, it's normally a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right. But in some cases, it's very rare, but in some cases you will see that. And normally you'll see it when you're doing offset walking paths. So you can see my warriors right now are at this boom cannon. And if I flare the core right now, the warriors on the bottom right corner, the very top of that corner, when they walk to the HQ, there's a cannon 2 buildings in front of the HQ. Those particular warriors, when they walk to that same corner on the HQ, they will have to walk perfectly through the middle of that cannon. Or, well, it's as close to the middle as you're ever going to get. So, now what we want to know is what side of the building they're going to walk around, because this is an interesting situation. So, what troops tend to do in these situations, in particular warriors, as a result of an update that hit roughly 2 years ago, warriors were at a stage where they were extremely overpowered and too easy to get to where you wanted without ever being hurt or harmed or in any way. So in order to make it harder for you to get them there safely, Supercell wanted the path to be a little longer, so there was more of a chance of you losing troops. As a result of this, when a line goes perfectly through the middle of a building, they will pick the side that gives them sort of like the most chance of being killed. So normally that's, ironically, the side that's closest to where they're finishing up at. So if I draw a line from the bottom of this cannon, from the bottom middle of the cannon to the HQ, just vertically straight up, the left side would be a little further away from the bottom right corner of that HQ, which is where they're going to finish at. The right corner would be a little closer. So for this reason, they're going to pick the right side to go around. And that's the logic of it, that's the reasoning. So as proof, let's watch this right now and see where they're going to walk around. I didn't take out the mines very well, but that doesn't matter because we're only illustrating a point right now. And you can see 3 warriors did walk around, so it was only the ones that were right at the end there, and that was, in a normal attack, if you wanted to keep them all alive, you'd be a bit concerned. But if you were trying to spare some GBE, losing 2 or 3 warriors isn't going to be a big deal to you. But this has illustrated a good point, I think, and given us some good information. So let's go on to the next segment. So, in some situations, you're going where you've got like a beachfront base or a top middle base, and you've barraged out the shield generator, and I do realize in some of these examples, or probably most of them, if not all of them, I haven't actually done that, but assuming that I had, what you're going to see is you can't deal with those mines very well. At the time I make this video, there's actually a critter glitch in place where I can't drop a critter box to destroy mines, so if I had, I could have done that there, but let's say for example that you want to use that critter box in your final attack, so you can't afford to drop it, right? Well, here's one potential means that a lot of people use to get to the HQ. They need to find a path that perfectly avoids the mines. So we can't go on the left right now because there's a bunch of mines up there. We could flank right up the top to a building and then go up. Also, another option is what we're going to do right now. You can see the right side doesn't really have any buildings at all, really. So I'm going to show you a quick potential path that can get you there. So we got hit by this shock mine. We're going to drop some smokes just so we don't take too much damage here. We got to this rocket. Now, in an ideal universe, I probably could have flared up a little bit higher and then the HQ, but I wanted to show you potentially a method that could save you smoke. And this also will help illustrate a point on why making checkpoints more often can be more important to you. If we draw paths right now on screen so you guys can see where those warriors are going to go, now we're going to adjust each path, and just so you guys can see like what buildings they're going to go around and so forth and so on. Something you're going to notice is they go around this flamethrower on the right, and if we had have made a checkpoint, say, up a little higher, that wouldn't have happened. If we had have went to, say, the machine gun first, there would have been a lot less problems. We could have kept them under the smoke a lot better. If we had to drop another smoke on top of that to group them up a bit more, we wouldn't have lost much troops. But it is what it is. So let's see how this goes. You guys can see, we'll put this in slow motion just so you guys can see a bit better. You guys can see where each one of them are going, and you can see the end result of my smokes not being grouped up too well. I got hit by a flamethrower pretty badly, so that's just one example of going around just to avoid mines. That's really the only use for it. It's all about finding the cheapest possible alternative to avoid those mines, because that's what we want to do. Okay guys, so that was my guide on warriors. I really hope you enjoy it. Some of you may notice that I've actually re-uploaded. I had to delete my last video on the warrior guide because for whatever reason the outro that I recorded for the original video somehow didn't render properly when I made the video, so I had like 4 minutes where it was just like black screen. But I fixed that now, so this is my conclusion to the video. I hope you guys have really enjoyed it. I tried to include as much as I could. You'll notice that I didn't include the adjusted path on how they go around the buildings. I did briefly touch on this at the start and through the middle of the video, but it's basically whatever side of the building that it's closer to is the side that the warrior will go around. So that's that. I did mention that in my Zuka walking path video, I did actually cover a whole heap of stuff on walking paths that may help you in this video. If you're struggling to understand that side of it, that'll definitely help you. I have a link in the video description down below. But yeah, I really hope you enjoyed it. I put a lot of work into this, so I hope it helps some of you out. And I'll see you guys in the next one.